The rain hammered downtown Chicago's empty streets at 2 a.m. when Marcus Ghost Rodriguez spotted her, a tiny figure huddled against the brick wall of an abandoned warehouse. After 15 years as a Navy SEAL, he'd seen enough broken things to know when something was desperately wrong. The 6-year-old girl looked up at him with eyes that had witnessed horrors no child should ever see. Marcus had retired from Black Ops 6 months ago, hoping to leave the shadows behind forever. But when he knelt beside the trembling girl and asked her name, what she whispered made his blood turn to ice. 3 words that connected to a classified mission he'd thought was buried forever, a mission that had supposedly ended with every witness eliminated. The child knew details that were impossible, government secrets that could topple nations, names of people who officially didn't exist. As sirens wailed in the distance, Marcus realized this wasn't a chance encounter. Someone had placed this girl in his path for a reason, and now both their lives hung in the balance. But who was this little girl, and how did she know the one secret that could destroy everything Marcus had ever believed in? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus's tactical mind kicked into overdrive as he studied the girl's face. Her dark hair was matted with rain, her clothes torn and dirty, but it was the way she held herself that sent warning bells screaming through his consciousness. Most children would be hysterical after whatever trauma had brought her here. This one sat perfectly still, watching him with the calculated awareness of someone far beyond her years. "Where did you hear those words?" he asked softly, keeping his voice gentle despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The girl tilted her head, studying him with unsettling intensity. "Daddy said them every night when he thought I was sleeping. He said they were very important words. He said if anything happened to him, I should find the ghost and tell him Operation Nightfall isn't dead." The name hit him like a sledgehammer. Operation Nightfall had been his last mission, a deep-cover infiltration of a human trafficking network that stretched from Eastern Europe to American soil. The operation had gone sideways when their target, a man known only as the Architect, had vanished along with crucial intelligence about high-level government corruption. The official report stated that all hostile assets had been neutralized, all evidence destroyed. But if this child was telling the truth, someone had survived. Someone who knew Marcus's call sign. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, scanning the empty street for any sign of surveillance. Old habits died hard, and right now those habits might be the only thing keeping them alive. "Emma," she whispered, "Emma Chen. My daddy's name was David Chen. He had pictures of you." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. David Chen, his translator and intelligence analyst during Operation Nightfall, a brilliant linguist who'd helped them decode intercepted communications from the trafficking network. Chen had been listed among the casualties when their safe house was compromised 3 years ago. "Your father is dead, Emma," Marcus said carefully, watching her reaction. "I know." Her voice carried a flatness that no 6-year-old should possess. "They killed him 2 days ago, but before they did, he gave me something. He said I had to bring it to you." Emma reached into her torn jacket and pulled out a small device that made Marcus's breath catch. It was a military-grade encrypted drive, the kind used for classified intelligence transfers, the kind that could start wars or end them. The sirens were getting closer now, their wailing echo bouncing off the empty buildings. Marcus had to make a choice, and he had to make it fast. Every instinct told him to walk away, to call Child Protective Services and let them handle this broken little girl with her impossible story. He'd paid his dues, served his country, earned his quiet retirement. But as he looked into Emma's eyes, he saw something that made that choice impossible. Behind the premature awareness and carefully controlled fear, he recognized something he'd seen in the mirror every day for the past 6 months. The haunted look of someone carrying secrets too heavy for their soul to bear. "Emma, listen to me very carefully," he said, making his decision. "We need to get out of here right now. Some very dangerous people might be looking for you, and if they find us together, we're both in trouble. Can you trust me?" She nodded solemnly, slipping the drive back into her jacket. "Daddy said you were one of the good ones. He said if anyone could keep his secret safe, it would be the ghost." Marcus scooped her into his arms, feeling how light she was, how fragile. As he carried her toward his motorcycle parked in the shadows, one thought hammered through his mind with the rhythm of the falling rain. Operation Nightfall was supposed to be over, but the game, it seemed, was just beginning. The safe house sat wedged between a laundromat and a shuttered pawn shop, its brick facade weathered and unremarkable. Marcus had chosen it precisely for those qualities, places where people minded their own business and asked no questions. He guided Emma up the narrow stairs, her small hand still clutching his jacket with desperate fingers. Inside the sparse apartment, fluorescent light flickered over mismatched furniture and bare walls. Emma moved like a ghost, her eyes darting to every corner, every shadow. Marcus watched her catalogue potential escape routes and hiding spots with the instincts of someone far too young to possess such skills. "You hungry?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. She nodded, a barely perceptible movement. The refrigerator held military MREs and bottled water, not exactly kid-friendly fare. Marcus heated a beef stew packet and set it before her at the small table. She ate mechanically, spoon trembling in her grip, never taking her eyes off the door. "Emma," he said, settling into the chair across from her, "I need you to tell me about the bad men." Her spoon clattered against the plastic container. "They'll find me." "Not here. This place is safe." The words tasted like a lie. Nowhere was truly safe, not when dealing with people who could make a child disappear from protective custody. "But I need to know who they are to keep you protected." Emma's lower lip quivered. "Mama said never tell anyone about the office." "What office?" "The one with the big windows. Mama cleaned there at night." Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. She saw the man with the scar, the one from the TV. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. "What man from TV?" "The one who talks about helping people. But Mama heard him talking to other men about making people disappear." Emma's eyes were wide, haunted. "She said we had to run, but they found us anyway." The apartment's heating unit kicked on with a mechanical whine. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. A public figure with enough power to compromise law enforcement, to snatch a child from federal protection. His secure phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Reed. You have something that belongs to us." The voice was cultured, educated, with the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Marcus met Emma's terrified gaze. "I don't know what you're talking about." The girl saw things she shouldn't have, heard things that could be misinterpreted. "We'd prefer to handle this quietly. She's 8 years old. Old enough to repeat what she's heard, young enough for people to believe her innocence." A pause. "We know where you are, Mr. Reed. We know about your sister in Portland, your nephew's soccer games on Saturdays. How wide would you like this circle to become?" The line went dead. Emma had stopped eating, her face pale as paper. "They found us." Marcus was already moving, grabbing the go-bag he kept ready, checking his Sig Sauer's magazine. "We're leaving. Now. Where can we go?" "They're everywhere." The despair in her voice cut through him. She was right. These people had resources, reach, patience. Traditional safe houses and protective protocols were compromised. They needed something different. "I know a place," he said, though uncertainty gnawed at him. "Someone who might help." They slipped out through the building's rear exit into an alley thick with the smell of garbage and decay. Marcus had parked the stolen Honda 3 blocks away, close enough for quick access, far enough to avoid immediate detection. As they hurried through the maze of narrow streets, he caught glimpses of movement in his peripheral vision. Figures that melted into doorways, cars that turned corners too precisely. The net was tightening. Emma stumbled, and Marcus scooped her up, feeling how light she was, how fragile. "Almost there, kid." "They killed Mama because she was going to tell," Emma whispered against his ear. "They made it look like an accident, but I saw. The man with the scar was there." "Which man?" "Emma. What's his name?" I don't know his real name, but Mama called him Senator when she practiced telling her story. Marcus nearly stumbled. A senator with the resources to corrupt federal agencies, to make witnesses disappear. The scope of what they were facing crystallized with terrifying clarity. The Honda sat undisturbed where he'd left it. As he fumbled for the keys with one hand while holding Emma, his phone buzzed with a text message. 1 hour. Come alone, or everyone you care about pays the price. An address followed, a warehouse district on the city's industrial edge. Marcus stared at the screen, calculating odds, weighing options. Every tactical instinct screamed trap, but the alternative was running indefinitely, while innocent people became targets. Emma looked up at him with eyes too old for her face. You're going to leave me, aren't you? Everyone always leaves. The accusation hit harder than enemy fire. Marcus made his choice. The abandoned warehouse squatted like a wounded beast against the Seattle skyline, its broken windows catching fragments of streetlight. Marcus kept one hand on Emma's shoulder as they approached the rusted fire escape, his other hand resting on the Sig Sauer beneath his jacket. 3 blocks of careful movement through shadow and alley had brought them here, to a place he'd used before when the world got too complicated. Up we go, sweetheart, he whispered, lifting Emma onto the first rung. She climbed without complaint, her small hands gripping the metal with determination that reminded him of soldiers twice her age. The girl had steel in her spine, even if terror lived in her eyes. The third-floor office space had once housed some forgotten import business. Now it served as Marcus's off-the-books safe house, stocked with supplies that didn't officially exist. He guided Emma through the reinforced door, noting how she immediately positioned herself with her back to the wall. Another learned behavior that made his jaw clench. Are you hungry? He kept his voice gentle while conducting a tactical sweep of the room. Windows secure, sight lines clear, escape routes verified. Emma nodded, still clutching the blood-stained envelope. She hadn't let go of it since the alley, treating it like a lifeline in choppy waters. Marcus pulled 2 MREs from a supply crate, heating the beef stew while Emma perched on a folding chair. The fluorescent light he'd rigged cast harsh shadows across her face, making the bruises more pronounced. Someone had hurt this child systematically, professionally. The thought ignited something dangerous in his chest. Emma, he said, settling across from her with his own meal untouched. I need you to tell me about the envelope. She looked down at it, her fingers trembling. Daddy said, if something happened to him, I should find someone who could keep me safe, someone who would understand. Understand what? Instead of answering, she carefully opened the envelope and extracted a photograph. She placed it on the makeshift table between them, her movement deliberate despite her fear. Marcus felt the world shift beneath him. The photo showed 3 men in dress uniforms, standing before an American flag. He recognized himself immediately, younger, prouder, accepting the Navy Cross from Admiral Harrison Webb. To his left stood Captain David Chen, Emma's father according to the dog tags. To his right stood Commander James Morrison, his former teammate and closest friend. Your father knew me, Marcus said slowly, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. David Chen. I remember him. Emma's eyes brightened for the first time since he'd found her. He talked about you, about Operation Blackwater. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Blackwater had been classified beyond top secret, a joint operation that officially never happened. Only 12 people knew the complete details, and 3 of them were in this photograph. Emma, where is your father now? Dead. The word came out flat, final. They killed him 2 days ago, made it look like a car accident, but I saw the man leaving our house before it happened. Marcus leaned forward. What man? She reached into the envelope again and produced a second photograph, this one taken with a telephoto lens. It showed a tall man in an expensive suit walking away from a suburban house. Even in profile, Marcus recognized him instantly. Commander James Morrison, his brother in arms, his friend. There's more, Emma whispered, pulling out a USB drive. Daddy made me memorize what to do with this. He said it contained proof about Blackwater. about what really happened there. Marcus stared at the drive, his mind racing through implications. Blackwater had been their most successful mission. They'd eliminated a terrorist cell planning to deploy chemical weapons in 3 major cities. Clean operation, no civilian casualties, mission accomplished. What proof could there be? Emma, I need you to think carefully. Did your father say anything else? Anything about why someone would want to hurt him? She nodded slowly. He said some of the men from his Navy days weren't who they pretended to be, that they'd made a deal with the devil, and now the devil wanted to collect. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We know you have the girl. Return what belongs to us, or join Chen in an early grave. Marcus deleted the message and moved to the window, scanning the street below. No movement, but that didn't mean anything. If Morrison was involved, they were dealing with someone who knew his tactics, his safe houses, his methods. We need to move, he said, already packing essential supplies. They found us too quickly. Emma slipped the envelope contents back inside with practiced efficiency. Where are we going? Marcus shouldered his go-bag and checked his weapon. The smart play would be to turn Emma over to federal protection and walk away. Let someone else handle the conspiracy, the betrayal, the impossible truth that one of his brothers had turned. But looking at this brave little girl who'd already lost everything, he knew he couldn't abandon her to a system that might be compromised. Somewhere safe, he said, opening the door to another fire escape, somewhere they won't expect. As they descended into the Seattle night, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Emma Chen had just handed him a key to a door he wasn't sure he wanted to open. The safe house sat in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. Paint peeled from weathered siding, and chain-link fences enclosed yards more dirt than grass. It was exactly the kind of place that attracted no attention, perfect for disappearing. Jake carried Emma up the front steps, her small arms still wrapped around his neck. She hadn't spoken since her cryptic warning about her father, but her grip had only tightened. Through the window, he could see Marcus moving around inside, setting up equipment with the efficiency of someone who'd done this countless times. We're going to be safe here, Jake whispered to Emma as he reached for the door. My friend Marcus is going to help us figure this out. She nodded against his shoulder, but he felt her tense as they crossed the threshold. The interior was spartanly furnished. A few chairs, a fold-out table, basic kitchen appliances, no personal touches, nothing to indicate who might live here. Marcus had already set up a laptop and some communication equipment on the table. Perimeter's clean, Marcus said without looking up. But that won't last long if someone's really looking for you. He glanced at Emma. How's she doing? Scared. Smart. And she knows more than she's telling us. Jake settled into one of the chairs, keeping Emma on his lap. Don't you, sweetheart? Emma finally lifted her head, studying Marcus with those unsettling dark eyes. Are you a soldier too? Something like that, Marcus replied, his voice gentler than Jake had ever heard it. I'm here to help keep you safe. Daddy said soldiers would come, but he said they might not be the good kind. Jake and Marcus exchanged glances. What else did your daddy tell you? Jake asked carefully. Emma was quiet for a long moment, her small fingers tracing patterns on Jake's sleeve. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. He said there are people in the government who do bad things, who hurt families, who make people disappear. She looked up at Jake. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should find someone with a uniform and tell them about Project Blackwater. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus stopped typing, his hands frozen over the keyboard. Jake felt his pulse spike. Emma, he said slowly, where exactly did you hear that name? Daddy's office. He has files. Had files. Her voice caught. The men who came took everything. But Daddy hid some papers. He told me where. Marcus was already pulling up search windows on his laptop, fingers flying across the keys. Blackwater's coming up clean in official channels, he muttered, which means it's classified above my pay grade, or it doesn't officially exist. Jake's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. In his experience, projects with names like that were either black ops programs or weapons development. Either way, not something a 7-year-old should know about. Emma, do you remember where your daddy hid those papers? She nodded. Under the loose board in my closet, behind my dress-up clothes. We need to get those files, Marcus said, but Jake was already shaking his head. Her house will be crawling with whoever killed her parents by now. It's a trap. Then we find another way. Marcus turned back to his computer. Give me her address. I'll pull up satellite imagery, maybe find a way in through the back or... A sharp crack echoed through the room, followed immediately by the tinkle of breaking glass. Jake was moving before his conscious mind processed the sound, rolling off the chair and behind the couch with Emma pressed against his chest. Marcus had already drawn his sidearm and was crouched beside the window. Sniper, Marcus hissed. Single shot, probably sighting us in. Emma made no sound, but Jake could feel her trembling. He pulled out his own weapon, checking the clip by touch. How many exits? Front door, back door through the kitchen, window in the rear bedroom. Another shot shattered what remained of the front window. This time, Jake heard the distinctive whistle of the round passing overhead. Professional work, meant to pin them down, not kill. Yet, they want us alive, he realized. At least for now. Won't last long. Marcus was already moving toward the back of the house. We've got maybe 30 seconds before they decide to rush the place. Jake scooped Emma up, keeping low as he followed Marcus toward the kitchen. How did they find us so fast? Working on it, Marcus growled, shouldering open the back door and scanning the narrow alley beyond. But right now, survival trumps investigation. The sound of vehicles approaching from multiple directions filtered through the walls. Too many engines, too coordinated to be coincidence. Emma pressed her face against Jake's neck. They're here, she whispered, and something in her voice made Jake's blood run cold. Because she didn't sound surprised. The safe house sat like a forgotten memory in a neighborhood where broken streetlights outnumbered working ones 3-1. Marcus pulled the stolen sedan into an alley behind the run-down duplex, scanning the shadows from old habit. 3 escape routes, minimal visibility from the street, and thick walls that would muffle gunshots. It would have to do. Emma hadn't spoken during the 40-minute drive, but her eyes never stopped moving. She watched the mirrors with the intensity of someone who'd learned the hard way that safety was always temporary. When Marcus cut the engine, she finally broke her silence. They'll find us. Not tonight, they won't. Marcus checked his Glock's magazine before sliding it back into his waistband. Come on. The safe house belonged to a contact from his army days, a man who asked no questions and kept no records. Inside, the smell of stale cigarettes and instant coffee hung in the air like ghosts of 1,000 surveillance ops. Marcus swept the rooms quickly, while Emma stood frozen in the doorway, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd grabbed from her foster home. All clear. He returned to find her still standing exactly where he'd left her. You hungry? She shook her head, but her stomach betrayed her with a low growl. The kitchen yielded canned soup and crackers that were only slightly past their expiration date. As Emma ate with mechanical precision, Marcus studied the photographs she'd handed him in the car. 3 men in expensive suits standing beside a shipping container, the numbers on its side clearly visible. In the background, partially obscured by shadows, was a face that made his blood run cold. Deputy Director Harrison Wells of the FBI, a man Marcus had worked with on joint counter-to-terrorism operations. A man he'd trusted with his life. Where did your father take these? Marcus asked, sliding one of the photos across the small table. Emma's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. The warehouse by the docks. He went there a lot for work. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But that night was different. He was scared when he came home. What did he tell you about his work? Import-export. Boring stuff, he said. Emma set down her spoon and pulled her knees to her chest. But sometimes men would call the house really late, and he'd get angry. Tell them he wasn't going to do it anymore. Marcus examined the shipping container's identification number. Even without running it through official channels, he could see enough detail to know this wasn't standard cargo. The positioning, The security presence visible in the photo's edges, the fact that federal law enforcement was involved, this had all the hallmarks of a black operation gone wrong. His secure phone buzzed. Unknown number. Yeah? Commander Kane. The voice was smooth, professionally neutral. I believe you have something that doesn't belong to you. Marcus moved to the window, checking the street through a gap in the blinds. Depends on what you think I have. A very frightened little girl who's been through enough trauma. We're prepared to offer her the protection she needs, proper counseling, a real home. All you have to do is tell us where you are. And the photos her father took? A pause. I'm afraid I don't know what you're referring to. Emma was watching him with wide eyes, and Marcus could see she'd recognized something in his expression. Fear flickered across her face like candlelight in a storm. Here's what I know, Marcus said into the phone. A man tried to do the right thing and ended up dead for it. His daughter is the only witness to whatever your people are trying to cover up. So forgive me if I don't trust your definition of protection. Commander, you're a patriot, a decorated soldier. Don't throw away your career for a misunderstanding that can be resolved quietly. Marcus ended the call and immediately began gathering their few belongings. They'd found the safe house faster than expected, which meant either his contact had been compromised or they were dealing with resources beyond what he'd imagined. We have to go, he told Emma. She was already standing, rabbit clutched tight against her chest. They're coming. It wasn't a question. This kid had developed survival instincts that would impress a combat veteran. Marcus checked his weapon one more time as the sound of approaching vehicles reached his ears. Multiple engines, moving fast but not reckless. Professional pursuit. Back door, he said, taking Emma's hand. They slipped into the alley as the first black SUV turned onto the street. Marcus counted at least 6 men deploying with military precision, night vision equipment, and enough firepower to level the building. These weren't FBI agents making an arrest. They were operators conducting a termination. As they disappeared into the maze of back alleys and abandoned lots, Marcus realized the conspiracy Emma had stumbled into ran deeper than he'd thought. Someone with serious resources wanted this little girl dead, and they were willing to burn through anyone who stood in their way, including a Navy SEAL who should have known better than to trust the system he'd spent his life serving. The warehouse district stretched before them like a concrete graveyard, each building a monument to industrial decay. Marcus kept the stolen sedan at a steady 35, headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness as he navigated the labyrinth of loading docks and rusted chain-link fences. In the passenger seat, Emma had finally succumbed to exhaustion, her small frame curled against the door, with Sarah's jacket draped over her like armor. Sarah monitored their 6 through the side mirror, her knuckles white against the door handle. 2 more blocks, then we turn left into the shipping complex. Building 7 Alpha should be... Movement, Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp as broken glass. Black SUV, quarter-mile back, been maintaining distance for the last 10 minutes. Emma stirred at the tension in his voice, her eyes snapping open with the hypervigilance of a child who'd learned that safety was always temporary. Are they back? She pulled out a tablet, fingers flying across the screen. 3. Main entrance we're heading for, service road on the east side and emergency access on the north perimeter. But Marcus, that emergency exit, blocked. Yeah, I see it. His tactical mind was already processing variables, escape routes, kill zones. The shipping complex was a potential trap, but they needed that safe house. Emma needed medical attention, food, and most importantly, the secure communications equipment that would let them contact the right people, assuming any of the right people was still alive. The SUV was closing distance now, no longer bothering with subtlety. Marcus could make out 2 figures in the front seats, and the way they moved suggested professional training. Not street thugs or opportunists. These were operators. There's something else, Sarah said, her voice strained. I've been monitoring federal databases. Ava Richardson's body was found 3 hours ago in her apartment. Single gunshot, execution style. Marcus felt ice water flood his veins. Emma's caseworker, the woman who'd tried to protect her, was dead, which meant the conspiracy reached deeper than he'd imagined. Did she have family? Anyone else who might have known about Emma? Negative. According to her file, she was a loner. No next of kin, no significant relationships. But Marcus, there's more. I cross-referenced her phone records with federal employee databases. She made 17 calls in the last week to a number registered to Deputy Director Catherine Mills at DHS. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Catherine Mills, he knew that name, had worked with her on 2 classified operations in Syria. If Mills was involved, then this wasn't just about Emma anymore. This was about something that reached into the highest levels of national security. The SUV made its move as they approached the complex gates, accelerating hard and pulling alongside them. Marcus caught a glimpse of the passenger, compact build, tactical gear, assault rifle visible through the tinted window. Professional, but not government. Private military contractors, maybe, or worse, foreign operatives. "Hold on," Marcus said, yanking the wheel hard left and punching the accelerator. The sedan's engine screamed in protest as they shot through the complex gates, tires smoking against asphalt. Behind them, the SUV overshot the turn, buying them precious seconds. Building 7 Alpha loomed ahead, a 3-story concrete monolith with boarded windows and graffiti-scarred walls. Sarah was already moving before the car stopped, pulling Emma from the passenger seat while Marcus provided cover. The building's front door was reinforced steel, but Sarah's keycard worked on the first try. They moved through corridors that smelled of rust and abandonment, emergency lighting casting sickly yellow pools across cracked linoleum. The safe house was on the 2nd floor, behind a door marked maintenance storage that opened onto a fully equipped operations center. Emma's eyes went wide as they entered. Bank after bank of monitors lined one wall, displaying everything from satellite feeds to encrypted communication channels. A weapons locker stood open in the corner, revealing enough firepower to outfit a small army. "Who are you people?" Emma whispered, and Marcus realized they'd moved far beyond the simple rescue he'd envisioned when he first found her on that dark street. "We're the ones trying to keep you alive," Sarah replied, already powering up the communication array. "But Emma, we need to know everything. Every detail about what you saw, what your parents were working on, who they talked to, because whatever they discovered, people are willing to kill for it." Outside, the sound of vehicle doors slamming echoed through the night. The hunters had found them again, and this time there was nowhere left to run. Marcus checked his weapon and moved toward the reinforced windows. "Sarah, how long do you need?" 10 minutes to establish contact with our handlers. 5 more to upload Emma's testimony to secure servers. 15 minutes. Marcus counted the muzzle flashes beginning to appear in the darkness below and knew they didn't have that long. The abandoned warehouse in the industrial district looked like every other derelict building Marcus had used for safe houses over the years. Broken windows, rusted fire escapes, and enough shadows to hide an army. Perfect for staying invisible while they figured out their next move. Emma sat huddled in the corner on a makeshift bed of blankets Marcus had scrounged from a nearby homeless camp, clutching the teddy bear like her life depended on it. She hadn't spoken since her revelation about the bombs, but her eyes tracked every movement Marcus made as he worked to secure their temporary sanctuary. "I'm going to set up some early warning systems," he told her gently, pulling basic surveillance equipment from his go-bag. "Motion sensors, cameras, nobody gets near us without me knowing about it." She nodded but said nothing, her small fingers working anxiously at the bear's worn fur. Marcus had been in tight spots before, behind enemy lines with compromised intel, outnumbered and outgunned in hostile territory. But this was different. The enemy wasn't wearing a uniform or flying a foreign flag. They were domestic, possibly government-sanctioned, and they were willing to kill a child to protect their secret. His secure satellite phone buzzed. The caller ID made his blood run cold. Admiral Peterson, his former commanding officer, and one of the few people who knew about Marcus's current assignment. "Sir." "Read," Where the hell are you? Peterson's voice was sharp, urgent. I've got FBI brass breathing down my neck asking questions about you and some missing girl. Marcus glanced at Emma, then stepped toward the far corner of the warehouse. What kind of questions? The kind that suggest you've stepped in something bigger than your pay grade. They're calling you a person of interest in a federal investigation. Something about kidnapping and interfering with national security operations. That's bullshit and you know it, sir. What I know doesn't matter right now. What matters is that half the alphabet agencies are looking for you and they're not planning to ask nicely when they find you. Peterson paused. Marcus, please tell me you haven't gone rogue. Marcus watched Emma trace patterns on the concrete floor with her finger, the same nervous gesture he'd noticed when she first mentioned the bombs. The girl I'm protecting has information about a terrorist plot, multiple bombs targeting American cities. Someone very powerful wants her dead to keep that information buried. Silence stretched across the connection. When Peterson spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. What kind of information? She was present during planning meetings, heard names, dates, target locations. Sir, she mentioned something called the Fourth Protocol. Does that mean anything to you? The silence this time was longer, more telling. Marcus felt the pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Admiral, you need to bring her in, Marcus. Official channels, full protective custody. Negative. Someone leaked our location to the extraction team that tried to take her. There's a mole in the system, possibly high level. I can't trust official channels until I know who. Damn it, Reed. With respect, sir, my mission parameters haven't changed. Protect the asset, gather intel, neutralize the threat. That's exactly what I'm doing. Peterson's sigh was audible through the encrypted connection. I can give you 48 hours before I have to report this conversation. After that, my hands are tied. Use the time wisely. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone, processing the implications. Peterson's warning about the Fourth Protocol's significance had been clear even in what he hadn't said. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. It was about something that reached into the highest levels of government. A soft sound made him turn. Emma had moved closer, her bare feet silent on the concrete. The man with the scar, she whispered. He talked about someone called the Admiral, said the Admiral would be very upset if the protocol was compromised. Marcus felt ice forming in his veins. What else did he say about the Admiral? That the Admiral had friends in Washington, important friends who helped keep the project safe. She looked up at him with those ancient eyes. Is your Admiral a bad man? The question hit him like a physical blow. Peterson had been his mentor, the officer who'd shaped his career and his understanding of duty and honor. The possibility that the man he'd trusted above all others might be involved in a conspiracy to murder American citizens was almost incomprehensible. Almost. Marcus had learned long ago that betrayal often came from those closest to you. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, not when Emma's life hung in the balance. I don't know, he told her honestly. But we're going to find out. A motion sensor chirped softly near the main entrance. Marcus immediately drew his sidearm and moved toward the window, scanning the street below. 3 black SUVs had pulled up outside, disgorging tactical teams in full combat gear. They'd found them already. Emma, he said quietly. Time to go. The warehouse district felt like a graveyard at 3 in the morning. Marcus kept one hand on Emma's shoulder as they moved through the shadows between buildings, his other hand never straying far from his concealed weapon. The girl had been silent since they'd left the safe house, but her grip on his jacket told him everything about her state of mind. Almost there, he whispered, though he wasn't entirely sure where there was anymore. The address Chloe had given him led to a converted loft in what used to be a textile factory. The building looked abandoned from the outside, but Marcus noticed fresh tire tracks in the alley and the faint glow of light bleeding through blackened windows on the 3rd floor. His instincts prickled. Too clean, too convenient. Something's wrong, Emma said suddenly, her voice barely audible. Marcus stopped walking. In the week since he'd found her, he'd learned to trust her intuition. The kid had survived this long by reading danger better than most trained operatives. What is it? She pointed to a fire escape ladder that had been lowered, its bottom rung touching the ground. Nobody leaves those down. My daddy always said they only come down when someone's planning to come back down fast. Smart kid. Marcus studied the building again, this time focusing on escape routes and sight lines instead of the entrance. That's when he spotted the sniper's nest, a barely visible adjustment to the building's roofline across the street. We're leaving, now. But as they turned to retreat, the alley behind them erupted with the sound of approaching vehicles. 3 black SUVs converged on their position, headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. Marcus grabbed Emma and dove behind a dumpster just as the first shots rang out. "Stay down and don't move," he commanded, drawing his Sig Sauer. The SUVs disgorged 8 men in tactical gear, their movements coordinated and professional. Military contractors, Marcus realized, the kind of expensive muscle that government black budgets could afford. They spread out in a practiced formation, using cover and concealment as they advanced. Marcus counted ammunition and calculated odds. 8 against 1, with a 7-year-old to protect, in an urban environment with limited cover and multiple overwatch positions. In the SEALs, they called this type of scenario a learning experience, the kind you either learned from or died trying. He squeezed Emma's hand. "When I say run, you go to that door over there, the red one. Break the window if you have to, and hide inside until I come get you. What if you don't come?" The question hit him harder than he expected. "I will." The tactical team was closing in, their discipline evident in how they communicated through hand signals and moved to eliminate his escape routes. But they made one mistake. They assumed he'd stay pinned down and defensive. Marcus had never been particularly defensive. He rolled out from behind the dumpster and opened fire, his first 3 shots dropping the point man and forcing the others to scramble for cover. In the chaos, he shouted, "Run!" and saw Emma sprint toward the red door like her life depended on it, which it did. The return fire was immediate and overwhelming, bullets sparking off concrete and metal around him. Marcus used the noise and muzzle flashes to track positions as he moved, flowing from cover to cover with the fluid efficiency that had kept him alive through a dozen combat deployments. A voice called out from behind one of the SUVs, "We just want the girl, Thompson. Walk away and this ends here." Marcus put 2 rounds through the vehicle's engine block in response. He was down to his last magazine when he heard the sirens. Not police, wrong pitch and cadence. Fire department, maybe ambulances. Someone had called in the gunfight, and emergency responders were heading into what would soon become a kill zone. The tactical team heard it too. Their discipline cracked as the mission parameters shifted from a simple snatch and grab to a potential public exposure event. Marcus saw one of them speaking rapidly into a radio, probably calling for extraction. Time to press the advantage. Marcus flanked left, using a loading dock for cover as he worked his way toward the SUVs. The team was regrouping, their attention split between maintaining containment and preparing for immediate departure. He reached the first vehicle and discovered something that made his blood run cold. The license plates were government issue, not just any government, Department of Defense. This wasn't some rogue operation or criminal conspiracy. This was official, sanctioned, and funded by the same people he'd spent his career serving. Emma hadn't just witnessed a crime, she'd stumbled onto something that went straight to the heart of the military-industrial complex. The sirens were getting closer. Marcus heard vehicle engines starting and knew the team was preparing to extract. He had maybe 30 seconds before they disappeared back into whatever shadow organization had sent them. 29 seconds to decide whether he was still fighting for his country or against it. Emma's terrified face flashed in his mind, and the choice became crystal clear. The safe house felt more like a tomb with each passing hour. Jake paced the small living room, while Emma sat curled in the corner of the worn couch, her small fingers tracing patterns on the fabric. The silence between them had grown comfortable, but the weight of what lay ahead pressed down like a physical force. "Tell me about the other children," Jake said finally, settling into the chair across from her. Emma's hand stilled. When she looked up, her eyes held that haunting depth that no 8-year-old should possess. There were 12 of us at first, in the white room. The white room? That's what we called it. Everything was white. The walls, the beds, the clothes they made us wear. They said it was to keep us clean, pure. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but nothing about that place was clean. Jake felt his jaw tighten. What did they do to you there? Tests. Always tests. They would take our blood, make us do puzzles, show us pictures and ask what we saw. Sometimes they would bring in machines that made beeping sounds and attach wires to our heads. Emma's fingers resumed their nervous tracing. The doctors wore masks. We never saw their faces. Do you remember any names? Anything they called each other? Emma nodded slowly. Dr. Sterling came the most. She had a silver pen that she always clicked when she was thinking. And there was Mr. Gray. That's what Dr. Sterling called him. He scared us the most because he never talked, just watched. Jake pulled out his phone and showed her the photo Marcus had sent earlier, a surveillance shot of the warehouse district. Have you ever seen this place before? Her reaction was immediate. Emma shrank back into the couch cushions, her face draining of color. That's where they took Tommy. Tommy? He was my friend. He was 11 and always shared his crackers with me during lunch one day after he couldn't solve one of their puzzle boxes. They said he was going to a special place for more help. Tears began forming in her eyes. We never saw him again. Jake set the phone aside and moved to sit on the coffee table in front of her. Emma, I need you to be very brave and tell me everything you remember about that warehouse. Can you do that? She wiped her nose with the back of her hand and nodded. It's big and dark. There are lots of metal stairs that make noise when you walk on them. They keep the special rooms in the basement. That's where the lights are always too bright and it smells like the medicine they put on cuts. Special rooms where they do the bad tests, the ones that make kids scream. Emma's voice became mechanical, detached, as if she was reading from a script. Room 7 is where they put the needles in your spine. Room 9 has the big machine that makes your head feel like it's splitting open. Room 12, she trailed off, shuddering. It's okay. You don't have to. Room 12 is where they tried to take my memories away. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He'd heard of experimental memory manipulation in black sites, but never involving children. Never anything this systematic. Did it work? Emma's smile was heartbreaking in its sadness. They think it did. That's why I could escape. They thought I forgot how to be scared, how to run, how to hide, but I just pretended to forget. Inside, I remembered everything. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. 3 black SUVs just pulled up to the warehouse. Heat signatures show at least 15 hostiles moving inside. Whatever you're planning, it needs to happen soon. He looked at Emma, this extraordinary little girl who had survived horrors that would break most adults. How many other children are still in there? 7 that I know of. Maybe more in the rooms I never saw. She grabbed his hand suddenly, her small fingers surprisingly strong. You're going to try to save them, aren't you? I'm going to do everything I can. They won't let you just walk in. Dr. Sterling said they have soldiers there, bad soldiers who don't follow the rules. Jake almost smiled at that description. Well, it's a good thing I'm a different kind of soldier. Emma studied his face for a long moment. You're scared too. It wasn't a question, and Jake saw no point in lying. Yes, but being scared doesn't mean you don't do what's right. It just means you're human. Tommy used to say that brave isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. Tommy sounds like he was a smart kid. He was. Emma's grip on his hand tightened. Promise me you'll try to find him, even if he's not okay anymore. He shouldn't be alone in there. Jake looked into those ancient young eyes and made a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. But sometimes hope was all you had to offer, and sometimes that had to be enough. I promise. The abandoned warehouse loomed before them like a monument to urban decay, its broken windows staring down like dead eyes. Marcus pressed his back against the rusted metal siding, feeling the cold seep through his jacket as he surveyed the perimeter. 3 black SUVs sat parked near the loading dock, their engines still ticking as they cooled in the night air. "They're here," he whispered into his earpiece, watching shadows move behind the grimy windows on the second floor. At least a dozen men, maybe more. Sarah's voice crackled back through the static. "I've got visual on the rear exit. 2 guards posted, automatic weapons. These aren't amateurs, Marcus." He'd left Emma with Father Rodriguez at the church, despite her tearful protests. The old priest had promised to keep her safe in the hidden room beneath the sanctuary, but Marcus knew it was only a matter of time before their enemies expanded their search. They needed to end this tonight. The plan was simple. Sarah would create a distraction at the rear while Marcus infiltrated from the north side. They'd confirmed that Senator Harrison was inside, along with at least 3 members of his inner circle. What they didn't know was how deep the conspiracy reached, or who else might be waiting in the shadows. Marcus checked his equipment one final time: tactical vest, night vision goggles, suppressed pistol, and the small recording device that would capture whatever confession they could extract. The evidence Emma had provided was damning, but they needed more, something that would expose the entire network before it could disappear into the political machinery of Washington. A distant explosion echoed across the industrial district. Sarah's handiwork, right on schedule. Marcus sprinted toward the building as shouts erupted from inside. He scaled the fire escape with practiced efficiency, his military training taking over as muscle memory, guided him up the rusted ladder. The 3rd-floor window had been left ajar, an oversight that would cost them dearly. He slipped inside, finding himself in what had once been an office space. Dust motes danced in the moonlight, streaming through broken glass, and the air tasted of mold and abandonment. Voices carried up from below, urgent and angry. "Told you this was a mistake. We should have eliminated the girl when we had the chance." Marcus recognized Senator Harrison's voice, that smooth baritone that had charmed voters for over 2 decades. He crept toward the stairwell, staying low and keeping to the shadows. "The SEAL is the real problem," another voice replied. "Military training, combat experience. He won't stop until we're all dead or behind bars. Then we make sure he stops permanently." "Where's the team I requested?" "En route. ETA, 15 minutes." Marcus descended carefully, avoiding the steps that looked most likely to creak. The main floor opened into a vast space, filled with shipping containers and industrial equipment. Portable lights had been set up in the center, creating a bright circle surrounded by darkness. Perfect for an ambush. He positioned himself behind a concrete pillar and activated his night vision. 4 men stood in the illuminated area: Senator Harrison, his chief of staff David Chen, and 2 others Marcus didn't recognize, all armed, all nervous. Their body language suggested they were expecting trouble. "Sir, we have a problem." A new voice, coming from someone Marcus couldn't see. "The rear team isn't responding. We may have been compromised." Harrison's face twisted with rage. How many people have to die because of one frightened little girl? This was supposed to be contained weeks ago. "The parents were supposed to be a warning," Chen said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "We never anticipated the daughter would escape, or that she'd find someone with the skills to protect her." Marcus felt his jaw clench. They were talking about Emma's parents as if they were nothing more than inconvenient obstacles. The rage that had been simmering in his chest since he'd found that terrified child began to boil over. He was about to make his move when footsteps echoed from the rear of the building. Sarah appeared at the edge of the light, her hands raised in surrender. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, and her tactical vest was torn. "Ah, Detective Walsh," Harrison said, his political smile sliding into place like a well-worn mask. "How good of you to join us. I trust your partner won't be far behind." 2 armed men flanked Sarah, their weapons trained on her center mass. Marcus counted at least 6 more positioned around the perimeter, all with clear lines of sight on his location. They'd been expecting him. "You know, Detective, in different circumstances, I might have offered you a position in my organization. Your dedication is admirable, if misguided." Harrison stepped closer to Sarah, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete. "But I'm afraid you've seen too much. You and your friend have become liabilities that can't be tolerated." Marcus reached for his weapon, knowing he was walking into a trap, but unable to watch Sarah die. As his fingers closed around the pistol grip, spotlights blazed to life from every direction, turning night into harsh, blinding day. "Drop your weapon, Mr. Torres," Harrison called out. "Let's discuss this like civilized men." The abandoned textile factory loomed against the storm clouds like a monument to decay. Marcus crouched behind a rusted shipping container, watching the building through night vision binoculars. 3 guards patrolled the perimeter in predictable patterns, their movements sloppy, clearly not military trained. But the thermal imaging device clipped to his tactical vest revealed at least a dozen heat signatures inside the main structure. Sarah pressed against his shoulder, her small frame trembling despite the tactical vest Chen had procured for her. "That's where they kept us," she whispered, pointing to a loading dock on the building's east side. "There are more kids in there." Marcus felt his jaw clench. Every instinct screamed at him to leave Sarah somewhere safe, but after the safe-house breach, nowhere seemed secure. At least here, he could keep her close, protect her directly. Chen had protested, but Marcus knew the truth. They were running out of time and options. "Stay exactly where I tell you," he murmured, checking his weapon one final time. "When I move, you shadow me. No matter what happens, you don't leave my side." Chen's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Perimeter is clear on the south approach, but Marcus, I'm picking up encrypted radio chatter, military frequencies." That changed everything. Marcus studied the guards again through his scope, noting details he'd missed before. Their casual posture was deliberate, a facade. These weren't street thugs guarding a warehouse. They were professionals playing a role. "It's a trap," Sarah said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. "They know we're here." Before Marcus could respond, his earpiece erupted with static, then Chen's urgent voice. "Multiple vehicles approaching your position. Military grade. You need to move now." The distant rumble of engines confirmed Chen's warning. Marcus grabbed Sarah's hand and sprinted toward the building, abandoning stealth for speed. If this was a trap, their only chance was to get inside before the net closed completely. They reached the loading dock just as the first set of headlights swept across the factory grounds. Marcus kicked open a service door, pulling Sarah into the darkness beyond. The smell hit him immediately. Fear, unwashed bodies, and something else, something medicinal. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows down a long corridor lined with heavy doors. Behind each door, Marcus could hear movement, soft whimpering, hushed voices, children. "The main lab is upstairs," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's where Dr. Winters keeps the records." Dr. Winters, the name from Senator Hayes's encrypted files. Marcus had suspected this went deeper than simple human trafficking, but seeing Sarah's haunted expression confirmed his worst fears. This wasn't just about moving children, it was about what they were doing to them. Boots echoed from the loading dock behind them. Heavy, coordinated footsteps, military precision. Marcus pulled Sarah down a side corridor as voices carried through the darkness. "Seal all exits. They're already inside." The accent was American, the tone professional. These weren't foreign operatives or hired mercenaries, they were US military. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. This operation, whatever it was, had official backing. That's why the safe house location had been compromised so quickly. That's why every move they made seemed anticipated. They reached a maintenance stairwell and Marcus paused to check his phone. No signal. The building was equipped with jammers. Chen was on his own out there, probably facing the same coordinated response they were trapped inside. "There's another way out," Sarah said, tugging at his sleeve. "Through the lab. Dr. Winters showed me once. There's a fire escape that leads to the roof." Marcus nodded, though every tactical instinct rebelled against moving deeper into the building. But sometimes the only way out was through. They climbed the stairwell, Marcus's weapon trained upward as their footsteps echoed softly on metal grating. Below them, he could hear doors being systematically opened, the searchers working their way through the building with methodical precision. The lab door was reinforced steel with an electronic lock, but Sarah surprised him by producing a keycard from her pocket. "Dr. Winters dropped this when I escaped," she explained, swiping the card. The lab beyond was a sterile nightmare, banks of computers, medical equipment, and filing cabinets that seemed to stretch endlessly. But what stopped Marcus cold were the photographs covering one entire wall. Hundreds of them. Children of various ages, each photo marked with dates, locations, and coded notations. Sarah's picture was there, along with dozens of others he didn't recognize. "They're not just taking kids," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying a weight no child should bear. "They're making us into something else." The sound of the stairwell door slamming open 2 floors below cut through the lab's humming silence. Their hunters had found the trail. Marcus grabbed a handful of files from the nearest cabinet and spotted the fire escape Sarah had mentioned. But as he reached for the window, floodlights suddenly blazed to life outside, illuminating the entire rooftop. They were completely surrounded. The abandoned warehouse smelled of rust and decay, its broken windows letting in slivers of pale moonlight that cut through the darkness like silver knives. Marcus pressed his back against a concrete pillar, feeling the rough surface through his tactical vest as he listened for any sound that might betray their position. Beside him, Emma huddled close, her small hand gripping his arm with surprising strength. 3 days had passed since their escape from the safe house, 3 days of moving through the shadows, of a city that had become their hunting ground. The faces on the surveillance photos Emma had memorized were everywhere now, walking the streets, sitting in unmarked cars, watching from rooftops. The conspiracy had tentacles that reached deeper than Marcus had ever imagined possible. A soft scraping sound echoed from somewhere in the warehouse's depths. Marcus tensed, his hand moving instinctively to the Glock holstered at his hip. He'd counted at least 6 men when they'd entered through the skylight an hour ago, but in a building this size, there could be dozens more. "They're getting closer," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible even in the suffocating silence. Marcus nodded, knowing she was right. The little girl's ability to sense danger had kept them alive more times than he could count. Whatever they'd done to her in that laboratory, whatever experiments they'd conducted, had left her with instincts that bordered on supernatural. She could feel their pursuers like a spider sensing vibrations in its web. The sound came again, closer this time. Footsteps, careful and measured, moving in a pattern that spoke of military training. These weren't street thugs or hired muscle. These were professionals, just like the ones who had torn apart the safe house with surgical precision. Marcus closed his eyes and let his SEAL training take over. In his mind, he mapped the warehouse's layout, remembering every detail from their reconnaissance. The main floor stretched out like a concrete ocean, broken by support pillars and the skeletal remains of old machinery. A mezzanine level wrapped around 3 sides of the building, accessible by metal stairs that would ring like church bells under a careless foot. The loading docks at the east end offered multiple exit routes, but they'd have to cross 40 yards of open ground to reach them. "Uncle Marcus," Emma breathed, using the name she'd started calling him somewhere between the second safe house and their current predicament. "There's something else. Something I didn't tell you about the files." He looked down at her, seeing intelligence far beyond her years, gleaming in those dark eyes. The moonlight caught the faint scar on her temple, a reminder of what they'd stolen from her childhood. "The man with the silver watch," she continued, her voice tight with concentration. "The one from the laboratory. I saw him in my dreams again last night. He's here, in the city, and he has something that belongs to my father." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Dr. Chen's research notes had mentioned a silver watch, describing it as a key component in something called Project Lazarus. If Emma was right, If the man who had orchestrated her kidnapping was close enough to visit her dreams, then they were walking into something far more dangerous than a simple extraction gone wrong. The footsteps stopped directly below their position on the mezzanine. Marcus could hear breathing now, slow and controlled, and the faint rustle of fabric as someone adjusted their position. Professional hunters, closing in on their prey. A red laser dot suddenly appeared on the pillar beside his head, tracking slowly across the concrete in search of flesh. Marcus grabbed Emma and rolled sideways just as the warehouse exploded into chaos. Muzzle flashes strobed through the darkness like deadly lightning, and bullets sparked off metal with sharp, angry whines. They tumbled down a maintenance stairway that Marcus had spotted during their earlier reconnaissance, Emma clutching the backpack that contained her father's encrypted files. The sound of pursuit echoed above them as their attackers realized their quarry had slipped the noose once again. The basement level of the warehouse was a maze of storage rooms and utility corridors that stretched beneath the main building like concrete arteries. Marcus pulled Emma through the labyrinth, his tactical flashlight painting brief glimpses of their path in stark white light. Behind them, voices shouted orders in a language he didn't recognize, but the tone was universal, frustration mixed with deadly determination. They reached a maintenance tunnel that connected to the city's storm drain system, just as the first pursuer's flashlight beam swept across the doorway they'd used moments before. Marcus sealed the access panel behind them and led Emma into the tunnels that would carry them away from immediate danger. But as they moved through the underground darkness, Emma's words echoed in his mind. The man with the silver watch was here, in the city, and he had something that belonged to her father. Whatever Dr. Chen had discovered in that laboratory, whatever truth was buried in those encrypted files, Marcus was beginning to understand that their real enemy had been hunting them from the very beginning. The abandoned warehouse stretched before them like a concrete tomb, its broken windows staring down at Marcus like dead eyes. He pressed his back against the rusted shipping container, feeling the cold metal seep through his jacket as he studied the building's perimeter. 3 guards patrolled the exterior, sloppy, overconfident. They moved in predictable patterns, checking their phones more than their surroundings. Sarah crouched beside him, her small hand gripping the emergency phone Detective Riley had given her. The device would automatically dial 911 if she pressed the red button, but Marcus hoped it wouldn't come to that. Not yet. "I count 12 heat signatures inside," whispered Torres through the comm unit, his voice barely audible even through the earpiece. The sniper had positioned himself on a water tower 3 blocks away, using thermal imaging to map the building's interior. "Main floor has 8 hostiles. 4 more on the 2nd level northeast corner." "Copy that," Marcus breathed. "What about the packages?" A pause. "I see them. Ground floor, center of the building. 3 figures, stationary. Looks like they're restrained." Marcus's jaw tightened. 3 children, probably no older than Sarah, sitting in that hell while their captors planned God knew what. The briefcase Sarah's father had died protecting contained more than just evidence of the trafficking ring. It held names, locations, and financial records that implicated officials at the highest levels of government, people who would kill anyone to keep their secrets buried. "Movement on the east side," Torres warned. "Black sedan approaching." Marcus peered around the container and saw the vehicle pulling up to a side entrance. 2 men emerged, their expensive suits incongruous with the industrial wasteland surrounding them. Even from this distance, Marcus recognized the taller figure, Senator William Harwick, chairman of the Armed Services Committee and, according to Sarah's father's files, one of the ring's primary facilitators. "Sarah," Marcus whispered, turning to the girl, "remember what we discussed. You stay here until I give you the all-clear. If anything goes wrong, press the button and run to the police cars waiting 2 blocks north," she finished, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "I know, Marcus. But what if—" "No what-ifs. Trust me." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "I'm bringing those kids home." Marcus checked his gear one final time. Suppressed pistol, tactical knife, flashbangs, and the briefcase that had started this nightmare. The plan was simple: create chaos, extract the children, and escape before reinforcements arrived. Riley and her team were positioned at strategic points around the perimeter, ready to move in once the children were clear. He slipped from cover, moving like a shadow across the broken asphalt. The first guard never saw him coming. Marcus wrapped his arm around the man's throat, applying pressure to the carotid artery until the guard went limp. He dragged the unconscious body behind a stack of rusted barrels. The second guard was lighting a cigarette when Marcus appeared behind him. A quick strike to the base of the skull dropped him silently. The third guard was the problem. He stood directly beside the main entrance, alert and scanning his surroundings. Marcus pulled out his phone and sent a text to a burner number he'd memorized. 30 seconds later, a car alarm began wailing 3 blocks away. The guard's head snapped toward the sound, and Marcus moved. By the time the guard realized the noise was irrelevant, Marcus was inside the building. The warehouse's interior reeked of rust and decay. Machinery hummed in the distance, and voices echoed from somewhere ahead. Marcus crept through the shadows between towering metal shelves, following the sound toward the building's center. He found them in a cleared area surrounded by shipping containers. 3 children bound and huddled together on the concrete floor. Guards stood at regular intervals, weapons visible but held casually. They felt safe here, protected by their isolation and political connections. That confidence would be their downfall. Marcus positioned himself behind a container that gave him clear sightlines to the guards. He pulled out the briefcase and activated a small device hidden in its handle, a GPS beacon that would signal Riley's team. Phase 1 complete. Voices approached from deeper in the warehouse. Senator Harwick emerged from the shadows with another man Marcus didn't recognize, their conversation carrying clearly in the open space. "Expect the girl to surface eventually," Harwick was saying. "When she does, we eliminate her and anyone who's helped her. This ends tonight." "What about the SEAL? My sources say he's former Tier 1. I don't care if he's Captain America. He's one man against an army. We have resources he can't imagine." Marcus smiled grimly in the darkness. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. He reached for his first flashbang grenade, fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. In 30 seconds, this warehouse would become a war zone, and he intended to be the only one left standing when the smoke cleared. The warehouse district felt like a graveyard at 3 in the morning, shadows pooling between abandoned buildings like spilled ink. Marcus pressed his back against the corrugated metal wall, feeling the cold seep through his jacket as he studied the compound ahead. 20 yards of open ground separated him from the chain-link fence, beyond which sat a nondescript industrial building that housed horrors he was only beginning to comprehend. "Thermal shows 12 bodies inside," whispered Agent Sarah Chen through his earpiece. 3 on the ground floor, 2 patrolling the perimeter, 7 in what looks like the basement level. Marcus adjusted his night vision goggles, cataloging every detail. This wasn't just another Black Ops mission. This was personal. Somewhere in that building, children were being held, processed, prepared for a fate that made his blood run cold. Children like Emma, the terrified little girl whose whispered words had started this nightmare 3 weeks ago. The conspiracy reached deeper than any of them had imagined. What began as a simple human trafficking ring had revealed tentacles stretching into the highest levels of government, military contracts, and international crime syndicates. The evidence they'd gathered painted a picture of systematic exploitation that had been operating for years under the protection of people Marcus had once trusted with his life. Movement on the east side, Chen's voice crackled softly. "Guard's making his rounds. You've got a 40-second window when he clears the corner." Marcus counted his breathing, muscle memory from 100 similar operations taking over. But this time felt different. This time, the stakes weren't geopolitical. They were deeply, painfully human. Every second those children remained inside was another moment of terror he might have prevented. The guard's footsteps echoed off the concrete, growing fainter. Marcus moved. He crossed the open ground in a low sprint, boots silent on the cracked asphalt. The fence was 8 feet high, topped with razor wire, but he'd scaled worse under enemy fire. His hands found purchase on the chain links, and he pulled himself up with controlled precision, every movement calculated to avoid detection. At the top, he carefully spread his jacket over the razor wire and rolled across, dropping into a crouch on the other side. The building loomed before him now, its loading dock doors sealed shut, but Chen had identified a service entrance on the north wall that showed up as a weak point on their thermal scans. "You're clear," Chen whispered. "But Marcus, the basement signatures are moving. I think they know something's wrong." He'd been afraid of this. Their investigation had been careful, methodical, but the people running this operation hadn't survived this long by being careless. Someone had gotten spooked, which meant the timeline had just accelerated dramatically. The service door was locked, but Marcus had come prepared. The electronic lockpick made quick work of the mechanism, and he slipped inside into absolute darkness. The building smelled of industrial disinfectant and something else: fear, desperation, the particular odor of human suffering that once experienced was never forgotten. His earpiece crackled with static. Then Chen's voice, urgent now. "Marcus, we've got vehicles approaching from the south. 3 black SUVs moving fast. I think they're evacuating." The implications hit him like a physical blow. If they were evacuating, they might be eliminating evidence. All evidence. He moved faster through the narrow corridor, following the building schematics Chen had provided, heading for the basement access. Behind him, he heard the rumble of heavy vehicles, doors slamming, voices shouting orders. Whatever subtlety the operation had possessed was gone now. This was about to become a race against time. The basement door stood slightly ajar, pale light spilling through the gap. Marcus approached with his weapon drawn, listening for movement beyond. What he heard made his jaw clench with barely controlled rage. The sound of children crying, adult voices giving sharp commands, the mechanical noise of equipment being hastily dismantled. Through the gap, he could see part of the basement. Industrial lighting, metal tables, computer equipment, and in the far corner, a cluster of small figures huddled together. Children, maybe a dozen of them, ages ranging from what looked like 6 to 16, all wearing the same expression of hollow terror he remembered from Emma's face. A man in expensive clothes was barking orders at 2 others, gesturing toward the children with casual cruelty. "Load them in the van. We're moving to the backup location. And make sure the servers are wiped completely. Nothing gets left behind." Marcus had seen enough. He'd spent his military career making split-second decisions with incomplete information, and every instinct told him that waiting for backup meant those children would disappear into a system designed to erase them completely. He checked his weapon one final time, steadied his breathing, and prepared to do what he'd sworn to do the night he found Emma on that dark city street. Some promises were worth any risk. The warehouse district stretched before them like a graveyard of industrial dreams, skeletal cranes reaching toward the storm-darkened sky. Marcus crouched behind a shipping container, his trained eyes scanning the perimeter of the target building, a nondescript concrete structure that housed enough classified intelligence to topple governments. "Movement, east side," whispered Torres through his earpiece. 2 guards, standard patrol pattern. Marcus checked his watch. Elena and Dr. Sarah Chen should be halfway to the safe house by now, but doubt gnawed at him. Senator Harrison's reach extended everywhere, and nowhere felt truly safe until this ended. "Rodriguez, what's your status on the security grid?" "Almost there, boss. Give me 30 more seconds." The plan was surgical. Disable the electronic surveillance, neutralize the guards without raising alarms, retrieve the evidence files that would expose Harrison's human trafficking network, and disappear before backup arrived. Clean and simple, except nothing about this mission had been either. A flash of movement caught his peripheral vision. Marcus froze as a figure materialized from behind a stack of rusted barrels, moving with the fluid precision of military training. The man wasn't part of Harrison's usual security detail. "We've got company," Marcus breathed into his mic. "Professional operators, not rent-a-cops." The confirmation came seconds later as Torres's voice crackled with tension. Multiple contacts converging. "This is a setup, Marcus. We need to extract now." Marcus's mind raced. Harrison knew they were coming, which meant someone had leaked their operation. The terrifying realization hit him. If Harrison knew about this mission, he might know about the safe house. "Abort mission," Marcus ordered, already moving. "Torres, Rodriguez, get out now." "What about the files?" Rodriguez's voice carried frustration. "They're not worth your lives. Move." As Marcus sprinted toward his extraction point, his encrypted phone buzzed with an incoming message. He recognized the number immediately, Dr. Chen. His blood turned to ice as he read the text. "They found us. Elena taken. I'm sorry." The world tilted on its axis. Everything they'd fought for, every risk they'd taken, had led to this moment of absolute failure. The little girl who'd trusted him, who'd whispered her terrifying secret on that dark street 3 days ago, was back in the hands of monsters. Marcus changed direction, racing toward his vehicle as automatic weapons fire erupted behind him. Torres and Rodriguez were fighting their way out, but Marcus could only focus on one thing: finding Elena before Harrison's people disappeared her forever. His phone rang as he reached his motorcycle. "Hello, Commander Reed." Senator Harrison's voice was smooth as poisoned silk. "I believe you've lost something precious. If you hurt her..." "The child is unharmed for now, but her continued well-being depends entirely on your cooperation. You've proven to be remarkably persistent and, frankly, expensive to contain." Marcus fired up the bike's engine, his mind calculating distances and possibilities. "What do you want?" "Simple. You're going to walk into the Meridian Hotel, Suite 2847, within the next hour. Come alone, come unarmed, and the girl lives. Attempt any heroics, involve your military friends, or try to be clever, she dies. How do I know she's alive?" The phone went silent for a moment. Then Elena's voice came through, small and frightened, but unmistakably alive. "Marcus? They said to tell you about the butterfly necklace, the one my mama gave me before." The line went dead. Marcus knew the Meridian Hotel, 47 stories of glass and steel in the heart of the city's financial district. Suite 2847 would be on one of the upper floors, multiple escape routes, perfect for an ambush. Harrison wasn't just planning to capture him, this was an execution dressed up as a negotiation. But Marcus had spent 15 years in situations where the odds meant nothing, where impossible was just another word for Tuesday. Elena had survived horrors that would break most adults. She'd trusted him with her secret, and he'd failed her. That ended now. As he wove through traffic toward downtown, Marcus called Torres. "I need everything you can pull on the Meridian Hotel's building schematics, security protocols, and current occupancy for floors 28 and 29. "Marcus, what the hell are you doing?" "My job." 20 minutes later, Marcus stood across the street from the Meridian's gleaming facade, studying the building's geometry like a chess master examining the board. Harrison thought he held all the pieces, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd threatened the one thing Marcus valued more than his own life. The doorman nodded politely as Marcus entered the lobby, his concealed weapons undetected by the hotel's standard security. Harrison had demanded he come unarmed, but Marcus hadn't survived this long by following enemy orders. As the elevator climbed toward the 28th floor, Marcus closed his eyes and centered himself. Elena was counting on him. The dozens of other children trapped in Harrison's network were counting on him. The elevator chimed softly as the doors opened onto what might be his final battlefield. The warehouse smelled of rust and decay, shadows dancing between towering shipping containers as Marcus crept forward with his rifle raised. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, but Emma's location beacon pulsed steadily from somewhere deep within the maze of steel and concrete ahead. 3 days had passed since Senator Williams's death in federal custody, an apparent suicide that fooled no one. The conspiracy had tentacles reaching into every corner of the government, and now they were making their final play. Taking Emma was their way of drawing Marcus into the open, and he was walking straight into their web. A soft whimper echoed from between the containers. Marcus's heart clenched as he recognized Emma's voice, barely audible but unmistakably hers. He moved faster, abandoning some caution for speed. The warehouse was too quiet, too empty. Where were the guards? Where was the inevitable ambush? He rounded a corner and found her. Emma sat tied to a chair in a small clearing between containers, her face streaked with tears but her eyes defiant. She was alive, conscious, and apparently unharmed. Relief flooded through him until he noticed the small device attached to her chair, a timer counting down from 3 minutes and 47 seconds. "Marcus!" Emma's voice cracked with a mixture of relief and terror. "It's a bomb! They said you'd come, and when you did—" "I know, sweetheart. I'm getting you out of here." He dropped to his knees beside the chair, examining the device. Simple construction, but effective. The timer was wired to enough C4 to level half the warehouse, 2 minutes 50 seconds. His fingers worked quickly on the ropes, binding Emma's wrists, while his mind calculated angles and possibilities. The timer couldn't be stopped. He could see that much from the sealed housing. They would have to run, but even at full speed, they might not clear the blast radius in time. "There's something else," Emma whispered urgently. "The man who took me, he said they know where all the evidence is hidden. Every backup drive, every witness. Tonight they're eliminating everything." Marcus's blood turned to ice. "What man? Describe him." "Tall, grey hair, scar on his chin. He knew things about my father, about what really happened that night. He said after this, no one will ever learn the truth." "Commander Harrison." Marcus should have known his former superior would surface eventually. The man who'd recruited him, trained him, made him into the weapon he'd become. The same man who'd ordered Marcus to eliminate Emma's father 2 years ago. An order Marcus had refused, leading to his discharge and Harrison's apparent fury. 1 minute, 30 seconds. The ropes fell away from Emma's hands, but the device around her waist was more complex. Marcus forced himself to focus, blocking out everything except the wires and connections before him. Red wire to the timer, blue to the detonator, yellow to— Well, still playing the hero, I see. Marcus spun, keeping his body between Emma and the voice. Harrison emerged from behind a container, flanked by 2 operatives in tactical gear. The commander looked exactly as Marcus remembered. Cold eyes, military bearing, and the absolute certainty of a man who'd never questioned his own righteousness. "Let her go, Harrison. This is between us." "Is it?" Harrison checked his watch. 1 minute 15 seconds. "You know, Marcus, I always admired your skills. Pity you never learned to follow orders. Like the order to kill an innocent man?" David Chen wasn't innocent. His research into our operations threatened national security, hundreds of covert missions, thousands of American lives at risk because one idealistic scientist couldn't understand the bigger picture. Harrison's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction, just like his daughter threatens it now. 58 seconds. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities. He could probably take out Harrison and 1 operative, but not both before they fired. Emma would die, and the conspiracy would continue unchallenged. "Unless you made 1 mistake," Marcus said, slowly reaching into his vest pocket. "You assumed I came alone." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "Bluffing. You don't have any allies left. We've made sure of that." "Really?" Marcus pulled out a small device, a remote detonator he'd been carrying for 3 days, waiting for the right moment. "Tell me, Commander, did you do a full sweep of this warehouse before setting up your little party?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Harrison's face. 40 seconds, Emma whispered. Marcus looked directly into her eyes, hoping she would understand. "When I say run, you run straight for that exit sign. Don't look back. Don't stop for anything. But the bomb, trust me." 25 seconds. Harrison raised his weapon. "Enough games, Marcus. Step away from the girl." Marcus smiled grimly and pressed the button. The charges he'd planted throughout the warehouse's support structure detonated simultaneously, bringing down sections of the roof and creating chaos. In the confusion of falling debris and emergency lighting, he grabbed Emma and ran toward the exit as Harrison's shouts echoed behind them. 15 seconds and counting. The abandoned warehouse district stretched before them like a concrete graveyard, shadows dancing between rusted shipping containers and broken streetlights. Marcus gripped his Sig Sauer, every nerve screaming as they moved through the maze of industrial decay. Behind him, Sophia's breathing was steady but tense, her small hand clutching the backup pistol he'd insisted she carry. 2 blocks north, she whispered, pointing toward a cluster of warehouses that loomed against the starless sky. The blue building with the loading dock. Marcus nodded, his tactical mind already mapping escape routes and potential ambush points. 6 months ago, he'd been planning missions in hostile territory overseas. Now he was navigating the deadliest terrain he'd ever encountered, one where a 7-year-old girl was the key to exposing a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. The intel Sophia had provided was devastating. Operation Nightfall wasn't just about arms trafficking or money laundering. It was a systematic plan to destabilize 3 foreign governments using manufactured terrorist attacks, creating chaos that would justify massive defense contracts and military interventions. The players involved read like a who's who of Washington power brokers, including Senator Harrison, Deputy Director Collins of the CIA, and at least 4 Pentagon officials. But tonight was about more than exposure. Tonight was about rescue. Maya's in there, Sophia had told him with the certainty only a child could possess. Her sister, the bait that had kept Sophia compliant for months, was being held in that warehouse along with evidence that could bring down the entire network. They reached the perimeter fence, and Marcus made quick work of the chain link with his wire cutters. The compound beyond was eerily quiet, too quiet for a place that supposedly housed a major criminal operation. His instincts prickled with warning. "It feels wrong," Sophia murmured, echoing his thoughts. "Could be a trap," he agreed, scanning the windows of the target building. No movement, no lights, except for a faint glow from what appeared to be a basement level. Or they're confident enough to keep minimal security. They approached the loading dock, staying low and using the scattered debris as cover. Marcus had called in backup. Detective Rivera and a team of federal marshals were positioned 6 blocks away, ready to move on his signal. But if things went sideways, 6 blocks might as well be 6 miles. The loading dock door was slightly ajar, revealing a slice of fluorescent-lit corridor beyond. Marcus motioned for Sophia to stay back as he peered inside. Empty hallway, industrial flooring, the distant hum of machinery, and something else, voices coming from below. He turned back to Sophia, noting how small she looked crouched behind a concrete barrier. For all her courage and intelligence, she was still just a child who should have been worried about homework and playground politics, not government conspiracies and rescue missions. "I'm going to check the basement," he whispered. "If I'm not back in 10 minutes, I'm coming with you." Her tone brooked no argument. Maya won't trust anyone else. She's been hiding from strangers for months. Marcus wanted to refuse, but he knew she was right. Maya had been through trauma that would break most adults. Sophia might be the only one who could reach her. They slipped through the loading dock door, moving with practiced silence down the corridor. The voices grew clearer as they approached a stairwell, at least 3 men, discussing transport schedules and timing. Marcus caught fragments about a midnight departure and cleaning up loose ends. The basement opened into a large storage area filled with wooden crates and industrial shelving, but it was the makeshift living area in the far corner that made Marcus's jaw clench with rage. A small bed, children's clothes scattered about, and evidence of long-term confinement. Sophia gasped softly, pointing to a figure curled up on the bed. Even in the dim light, the resemblance was unmistakable, the same dark hair, the same delicate features. Maya looked even younger than Sophia, impossibly fragile in the harsh warehouse environment. "Maya," Sophia whispered, stepping forward despite Marcus's restraining hand. The little girl's head snapped up, eyes wide with terror until they focused on her sister. Then her face crumpled with relief and joy. "Sophia, you came back." "I promised I would," Sophia said, rushing to embrace her sister while Marcus kept watch on the approach routes. "We're getting you out of here." Footsteps echoed from the stairs behind them, multiple sets, moving with purpose. Marcus spun, weapon ready, as 3 armed men descended into the basement. The leader, a scarred man Marcus recognized from surveillance photos as Viktor Kozlov, smiled coldly. "How touching," Kozlov said, his accent thick with mockery. "A family reunion. Senator Harrison will be so pleased that all 3 of his problems have decided to gather in one convenient location." The warehouse erupted in chaos as Marcus dove behind a concrete pillar, bullets sparking off metal beams above his head. Sarah's small hand clutched his vest as he pressed her against the wall, his eyes scanning the maze of shipping containers and industrial equipment that had become their final battleground. "Stay low, sweetheart," he whispered, checking his remaining ammunition. 3 magazines left, against what sounded like a small army converging on their position. Senator Blackwood's voice echoed through a megaphone from somewhere in the darkness. "You've caused enough trouble, Commander. Send out the girl, and I'll make this quick for you." Marcus almost laughed at the absurdity. 2 weeks ago, his biggest concern had been adjusting to civilian life. Now he was protecting the only witness to a human trafficking operation that reached into the highest levels of government, with half of Washington's elite wanting them both dead. Sarah tugged on his sleeve, pointing toward a service ladder that led to a catwalk 20 feet above. "Smart kid. High ground meant better visibility and fewer angles of attack." He nodded, then grabbed his radio. "Detective Hayes, what's your status?" Static crackled before Hayes' voice came through. 2 minutes out with backup. "The FBI finally listened. They're bringing everyone. Copy that. We're going vertical." Marcus scooped Sarah up, feeling her trembling despite her brave facade. The girl had been through hell, had seen things no child should witness, yet she'd never broken. Her testimony would put Blackwood and his entire network away forever if they lived long enough to deliver it. They reached the ladder as footsteps pounded across the warehouse floor below. Marcus could see tactical lights cutting through the shadows, at least 6 teams moving in coordinated patterns. Professional mercenaries, not Blackwood's usual hired thugs. "You go," he whispered to Sarah, steadying her as she climbed. Her small hands gripped each rung with determination that reminded him of his own daughter, safe now on the other side of the country with her mother. A spotlight blazed to life, sweeping across their position. Marcus pressed himself against the ladder as automatic weapons fire chewed through the air where they'd been seconds before. Sarah had made it to the catwalk and was crawling toward a control booth. Marcus hauled himself up just as the ladder below exploded in a shower of sparks. Someone had brought heavy firepower to this party. "There!" a voice shouted from below. "Northwest catwalk!" More gunfire erupted, and Marcus rolled behind an electrical junction box, pulling Sarah down beside him. Through the metal grating he could see Blackwood himself now, flanked by men in tactical gear. The senator's usual political composure had cracked, revealing something desperate and dangerous underneath. "You don't understand what you're interfering with," Blackwood called up to them. "This operation has protected American interests for years. That girl is a security risk." "She's a witness to murder," Marcus shouted back, moving along the catwalk toward what looked like an exit onto the roof. "Your operation ends tonight." "Does it?" Blackwood's laugh held no humor. "You think the FBI will make a difference? Half my task force members are on my payroll." Marcus felt his blood chill, but Sarah squeezed his hand. "He's lying," she whispered. "Detective Hayes showed me the pictures. She knows who the bad ones are." Smart kid indeed. Hayes had been building her case carefully, using Sarah's information to identify the corrupt elements before making her move. The cavalry coming wasn't compromised. It was hand-picked. The warehouse lights suddenly blazed to full brightness, and Marcus heard the thunder of helicopters overhead. Through the skylights, he could see repelling lines dropping as federal agents fast-roped into the building. FBI, drop your weapons. The firefight below intensified, but now Marcus could distinguish between the two groups. Blackwood's mercenaries were outnumbered and outmaneuvered, caught between the incoming federal agents and local SWAT teams that had surrounded the building. Marcus found the roof access door and tested it, locked, but his breaching charge from the military days still worked. The explosion blew the door clean off its hinges. Cool night air rushed in as they emerged onto the warehouse roof. The city spread out below them, lights twinkling like stars. In the distance, Marcus could see more police units converging on their location. "It's over, Sarah," he said, kneeling beside her. "You did it. You were brave enough to tell the truth, and now the bad people can't hurt anyone else." Sarah looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much but still held hope. "Will you visit me when I'm in the safe place?" Marcus smiled, remembering his own daughter's request for bedtime stories over video calls.
"Count on it, sweetheart, count on it."
As the last gunshots faded below and Hayes' voice crackled over the radio with all clear, Marcus finally allowed himself to breathe. The nightmare was over, but the healing could begin.